I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book Take the High Road. Divorce with compassion for yourself and your family, no other than Mr. Andy Haller.
Thank you, Daniel.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Andy, and can you please introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm a successful businessman, Daniel, and I wrote a couple books maybe 20 years ago on real estate investing. And I used to own a international freight forwarding company, so I'm a pretty diverse guy with a lot of interest, and I've had some successes. And one thing I swore I'd never write another book again, and then I had my own divorce. And my story is kind of interesting, Daniel. Everybody has a different coping mechanism when they get stressed. For me, I didn't sleep a lot, and I read a lot of other books on divorce. And I also started taking notes. Whenever I'm stressed, I take notes. When my mom was passing away in a hospice, I started to write notes, and the notes evolved into an article that got picked up in 5 newspapers on the Mother's Day after she passed. So I'm going through my own divorce. I'm reading all these other books, and I noticed a gap in the divorce book space. There were great books out there from attorneys, from a legal perspective, from therapists for children or for the divorcees themselves. There's books on what to do with the family house when you split up. So they were all good. And I felt even a bad book, if you took one thing from it and it helped, it's certainly worth it. But most people are not like me. And when you're getting divorced, the world is closing in around you, Daniel, and you don't have a lot of time. And what I didn't find out there was one comprehensive book written objectively, not from a certain perspective, like an attorney's or whatever, and that took all the advice from all these experts. So I looked at my notes. I'm like, oh my God, I got a great outline here for a book. And I began a process that took me 6 years, where I began to interview all these experts in the divorce book space. I interviewed attorneys, co-parent counselors, daddy coaches, mediators, and dozens of divorcees who themselves went through high conflict divorces and landed in places where they're now leading good lives. So I took all these lessons and I put together, it's almost like a businessman's best practice book for how to start a business and run a business effectively. So that's my story. And, while my book is kind of new still, the second edition just launched a handful of months ago. I've almost got 100 5-star reviews. So I'm really humbled by the feedback from people. And, unlike a lot of other authors, this isn't my business, Daniel. I wrote this book to help people. I know it sounds kind of corny. I've got a successful business, and this is kind of my payback, because a lot of people helped me when I went through my own divorce. And this is kind of what I'm trying to give back to those that are both going through the journey and also those who have been divorced and they're trying to co-parent effectively with somebody who they couldn't live with.
Congratulations, Mr. Andy. And what age did you realize that you are good in writing?
Well, I did write 2 other books, and one of them, they're both niche books. They're not a general interest book like a novel. And our first book, I co-authored it with my real estate partner. It hit at one point a top 79 for Amazon. And niche books don't typically get that high, Daniel. You probably know this, that you're in the space. A niche book competing against a general interest book, you're not going to get that high on Amazon list. So the book was really well received. And I've written articles before, like the one I talked about my mom. So I hope I have some skills, but I did take my book and I had a number of people proofread it, including two authors, because it was very important to me that what I create be of quality. So I do think I've done that, and I'm proud of it so far.
Who are your favorite authors that influence you the most?
Well, my one of my favorite two of my favorite authors are quite different. Leon Uris, who's passed away, he was an author who wrote historical fiction books, which were I found that a fascinating way to learn about history around a fictional story. And so I've read most, if not all, of his books. And my current favorite is Dan Silva, who is writing a series of like he's also quite prolific, literally a book a year, and they're spy books, and I find that's pretty interesting. Books that have really impacted me in the past. If I find myself mentoring a younger person, I'll get Tuesdays with Maury, the Celestine Prophecy, and Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Those are three of my favorite books that I typically will give to a young person when I'm trying to mentor them.
Classic, people, classic. So, Mr. Andy, if you describe the writings of your favorite authors, what is it or what are they?
Well, the book space that I enjoy the most, Daniel, are science fiction and spy and espionage books. I love those types of books. And typically, how I would define a good book, other than like a self-help book like what I wrote, is you'd rather read the book than watch a great TV show on Netflix. If you've got a book, if you've got a book like that, ladies and gentlemen, you've got a great book.
Definitely, certainly. So, Mr. Andy, what are your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
Well, short term, this book I really want to see succeed. I want, I wrote a self-help book, Daniel, and sadly, over 50% of marriages tend to not make it. So certainly the appeal of this book is very large, but it's a really, really crowded space. As you probably know, today, only about 1 in 100 books make it. So I'm really focused on trying to get the word out about this book. And then long term, I can't say I have any right now because I'm not your typical guest. I'm not being an author is not my my number one thing. It's something I've done 3 times in my life because I felt a need at that time to either document something I was doing or give back to others. But I have written a number of op-eds and articles that tend to get picked up by papers every now and then, and that's something I'm kind of proud of.
Very well said, Mr. Andy. But before we go on, I want to shout out to the people listening in Switzerland. Thank you, Switzerland, for supporting this podcast because in Zurich, I got 45% audience share, VOD at 15%, Arago at 11%, Lucerne at 5%, Ticino at 3%, Basel City. What else? I have 15 places in Switzerland listening to me. Thank you so much. Bern, Geneva, and a lot more. Thank you, Switzerland, for supporting this podcast because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, like Mr. Andy Heller. Mr. Andy, take the high road. Do first with compassion for yourself and your family. How did you craft it?
Well, if I could share a quick story is how it happened. So I'm a guy, Daniel. I know we're just kind of meeting online here. We don't go back 20 years, but I'm that guy in every group of friends that people come to when they're challenged for a reasonable solution. I tend to be pretty compromise oriented. I don't get too, I wouldn't be the guy out there to hurt other people. I try to always look at both sides. So when I went through my own divorce, it was a high conflict divorce. And both me and my ex were advised, why don't you guys go get a therapist? It can't hurt. You guys got a lot of drama going on. And I'm like, that it can't hurt. And I said, well, I want a therapist specifically. I asked for a couple recommendations of somebody who had dealt with divorced men. So I got this great therapist, Daniel, and something happened with my ex. And I pretty much figured out what I was going to do, but I waited. I said, I'm going to wait and talk to this with my therapist. And I want to make sure that I get her affirmation it's the right thing to do. So I go into her office for a session and I said, well, this is what's going on, but don't worry, I've thought it through and here's what I'm going to do. So she listened to me. She was polite. She said, Andy, she went through all the whole therapy speak. I'm glad you think that way, but you're not going to do what you want to do. You're going to do the opposite. And I'm like, what? She said, no, listen to me, hear me out. And she went ahead to give me advice that was the opposite of what I intended to do. And as I heard the words coming out of her mouth, Daniel, I was flabbergasted at the degree at which my own instincts were off. And again, I am a reasonable guy. I was not that guy out there that really, I didn't want to hurt my ex-wife. I didn't want to damage her. I just wanted to land in a healthy place, let her lead her life and let me lead my life, raise our children. But what I realized at that moment, that's the moment I decided to write this book. Because I looked at it and here's my thought. Here I am. I've read all these other books. I'm a reasonable, compromise-oriented businessman who is not out to hurt his ex-wife. And I wasn't aware of the degree at which I was emotionally compromised and not able to make the right decisions. That session made me realize how much people need help. And then I looked at my notes and I'm like, oh my God, I've got an outline here for a book that can help people that don't understand or realize the degree at which they're off and help them make the right choices, both during the divorce and co-parenting in the years after the divorce. And that was the genesis behind my decision to write this book. It was a realization that there's lots of good books out there, but they don't help. They're not comprehensive. And from a specific angle, like a legal angle or a therapist angle or a mediator's angle, that's not the big thing that people need. Most people might have 3 hours. So you got to give them everything they need to get through the divorce healthy and a co-parenting framework to use for a decade or more once the split has been done. And that's what I hope I've created, Daniel. And again, I'm really humbled because I'm not a writer by trade. I'm a guy who writes when I feel something happens, whether it's an investment or something I see on the news where I write a piece for a newspaper, or like this book, I saw a need and I wanted to try to help people who, and again, like we said earlier, literally half of marriages end in divorce. And we all have people close to us who we see them going through divorce and they're struggling. So hopefully my book can be a gift that can help people a little bit.
Well done, Mr. Andy. So take the high road. What behind the title of your academic book?
Well, you're going to laugh at this answer. Probably you're not expecting this answer. If I had it to do over again, I would change the title. Because somebody picks up the title, says, take the high road, divorce with compassion for yourself and your family, and might have a first impression, Daniel, that, oh, this guy's saying compromise everywhere. I'm not inclined to do that. That's not what I'm saying, everybody. So in the divorce space, if you can pick your battles or identify 2 or 3 things that are really vital to you, and go to your attorney and say, this is what I need to achieve. Everything else, I want to compromise. Well, guess what, everybody? Two things will happen. Number one, you're going to save a ton of money in legal fees. Number two, and just as important, if not more important, your stress is going to go way down. So take the high road is really about picking your battles and limiting your battles. And when you do push back, you do it in a manner that will hopefully not alienate your relationship further, so that if you have to co-parent with this person, you could still have a framework to do that. So in the book, the style of the book, Daniel, we describe 46 tips and strategies for situations where the typical divorcee will find him or herself in at least 30 or 35 of these tips. So you some of them help you negotiate a good deal. Some of them help you when you can't communicate with your ex and you want to figure on your divorce strategy. Some of them help you deal with your attorney. And then a bunch of the tips are for co-parenting, actually after the divorce. Okay, because here you are trying to raise healthy kids in two households with somebody you couldn't live with in one. It's not particularly easy, but hopefully with these tips that describe situations that we divorcees find ourselves in, you'll have the tools to navigate that, Daniel.
Interesting indeed, Mr. Andy. And according to Gary Yamada, insightful read on a difficult subject. What are the elements that you put on your self-help book that make this book so insightful?
Well, I'll give you something you won't find in any other divorce books. So I am not an attorney, as I've said. I'm not a therapist. I'm a businessman. And as I was putting this book together, divorce is about conflict. And there are actually business skills that I've studied for use in high conflict situation. And some of these are in negotiations, helping you negotiate a good deal, but most of these are in co-parenting. So I actually met with my therapist and I said, I want to introduce these themes into a book. And I talked to her about these tips. And I can give you an example if you're interested, Daniel, if we have the time. And she said, this is amazing, Andy. I've never seen that before. It will absolutely be effective. So one of the things that you'll find that is unique to my book, there are business skills introduced for use in high conflict business situations that divorcees can use to work with their former spouse. In all these interviews I did with these divorcees, many times I heard something like this: Andy, you don't understand. No matter what I do, he's going to say no. Andy, no, she's totally obstinate. No matter how hard I try, she pushes back on all of my suggestions. Okay. So that's not uncommon for divorcees to land in a place for a period of time where their former spouse is going to say no to everything. All right. So you're communicating via text, you're communicating via email, and you're calling and you're saying, this happened with little Johnny, our son, and this is what I think we should do. Well, the problem is the answer is going to be no, because the idea came from you. So what's the solution? Well, you change how you communicate. You stop offering the solution and you just define the problem and you say, what do you suggest? And through a series of exchanges with your ex, you want hopefully to push your ex to where he or she will come up with a suggestion that they will own, not you, but the suggestion will be close to what you wanted in the first place. But you allow him or her to own the idea. This is also introduces a human relations principle, but again, it will require a little bit of massaging, Daniel, to change how you communicate. You never say something like, well, Johnny is complaining about going to ballet. He doesn't want to do it. He's complaining about it. I want him to play basketball. Okay? There's going to be
Yes.
pushback. Instead, you change that to, oh my goodness, Johnny's complaining about ballet in my home. That's all I hear. I bet you're hearing the same thing too. Do you have any suggestions? Okay, you get it. You hopefully get a suggestion that is close to what you want to eventually push your ex to, and you land in a place that is similar to what you would have suggested in the first place, but you allow your former spouse to own the answer. So this is a very, very effective business communication tip when you're dealing with a business colleague who's going to shoot down anything that you say because it came out of your mouth. So what do you suggest? What do you suggest? Just define the problem. Now, this is not something that anybody really wants to do in their co-parenting relationship permanently, Daniel. But most divorces have a period of time of 1 to 3 years where it's pretty high conflict before emotions relax a bit, abate, and the couple can actually land in a place where they can co-parent more effectively. So these are tools that can be used during these high conflict situations because, unfortunately, the kids' lives are not going to wait. The kids are still growing up. The kids need you to make decisions whether you guys get along or not. So this is an example of something that is unique in my divorce book that you won't find in others.
Well, interesting, Mr. Andy. But before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, our third season with Chef Alessandro, one of the best executive chef in one of the best five-star restaurant in downtown Toronto. And please do listen to our latest episode. We talk about spice, people, one of the ingredients to make your food delicious. Plus one more, our books are out. Not only one, but 12 volumes, people. Food 101, Volume 1 Basics until 12 is only the books that you need to create a delicious food. Available on Amazon and leading online bookstores worldwide. So, Mr. Andy, what do you advise, or do you have any advice for aspiring writers out there?
Yes, I do. The first, I would give you some tips. First is put together an outline. All right, whether it's a novel or a self-help book, create an outline or a map of what you want to write about, and be willing to do many, many, many drafts. And then the last thing I would say is have a number of people read your book and at least one other editor go through your book to polish it. You may know what you want to say. You may have written it down in a manner that you will understand it, but you want to be writing not for your sake, but for your readers. And that's one of the key benefits of having a professional editor go through your book. I had two, and both of them really helped me tremendously to make my points more succinct so they're more powerful. So whether it's a self-help book, a general interest book, taking your time, involving professional editor or editors, having a couple of your friends proofread, and taking this advice and bringing it into a final version will help you create a more impactful book, one that you'll be more proud of.
What's the most rewarding aspect of being an author?
Well, what I would say is when you create something that's quality and you get really good feedback from those people you don't know, there's nothing like it. The feeling is exhilarating, Daniel. When we wrote our real estate books, I remember this one real estate investor posted a video review of our book online, and he just held it up and said, if you're going to invest in real estate, get this book. This is my Bible. And I don't know the guy. I mean, I didn't pay him. I never met the guy. And was such an incredible feeling to to see that, Daniel. Our first real estate book got picked up and recommended by Fortune magazine. I'm like, holy smokes, I'm just some guy in Atlanta, and I've just been, my book has been written about in Fortune magazine. This book is different because this book, I did not write this book to make money. I did not write this book about investing. I wrote this book about a topic that for many people, it's the worst thing that happens to them in their lives. So what's rewarding for me, and again, I'm at the early stages, but I see a review on Amazon from somebody I don't know, and they say, this book helped me be a better parent. It helped me deal with my ex. This book helped my children. That to me, it's just an indescribable feeling. So for self-help books like this, when you get verifications that you actually help people, and that was your intent, there's nothing like it, Daniel. The feeling is exhilarating.
Definitely priceless, people. So, Mr. Andy, how do you feel about the current state of the publishing industry nowadays?
Oh, to be honest, Daniel, it's a little bit of a bummer. And I got to say, I did not realize this when I wrote my book. So my book first launched last year with a traditional publisher. I've since made a few changes and self-published it. It's on Amazon. But she told me, Andy, the statistics today are just not really exciting. It's 1 in 100 books are actually making money. And, that's a reflection of a lot of, I'm come from a generation, Daniel, that where, we read more, and I'm not sure it's happening with today's youth, which is a shame. And it's one of those things I do hope turns around. Now I can speak as a customer of books because I know your audience is really vast. I ran my own business for a number of years, and during about a decade, I just was so busy running my business. I don't think during the entire decade I picked up a book. So my wife and I've remarried. My wife and I went on a vacation to Europe this spring, and she already pre-warned me, I'm going to do some shopping, so you better have something to do. So I brought some books. I brought this first Dan Silva book, and I brought another book, and I read, and I reminded myself of how much, Daniel, I had missed and how much I enjoyed reading. And since then, I must have read another almost a dozen books in just 4 or 5 months since then. And for those of you listening, and then what I've done since then is I've now gone to my son, who doesn't read a lot. He's in high school. And I said to him, all right, you want that new hockey stick because he plays competitive hockey? All right, here's a book. Read it. It impacted me when I was a kid. It's a timeless book. Well, let's talk about it, and then I'll get you the hockey stick. So I'm going to do my part as an old father here to impress upon my children that this is something that I don't care if their generation isn't doing it a lot. It's something that's special, and picking up a book is just something you don't get out of a movie or a TV show or a TikTok.
Yes, definitely. And nowadays, I think, Mr. Andy, millennials and Gen Z, they prefer audiobook because of their busy world. They can
Well,
do driving while listening, and I think we need to adapt those evolution. We need to make our books into audio. What don't you think?
well, I still think there is something special about sitting down and reading. I mean, I've done audiobooks myself also. And that's actually, I would say, if a current generation, the young kids today, they are at least reading books in an audio format, yeah, that's better. My concern, Daniel, is that they don't read enough at all, but hopefully they are doing the audio.
Definitely. So, Mr. Andy, if you go back and give advice to yourself when you were first starting out as a writer, what would it be?
Be patient and have a vision of what you want to create. Don't just start writing. I kind of said earlier to put together that outline, and we actually did that. And I understand what you want to do and what you want to accomplish with the book. And this is kind of important because I've written 3 books, 2 books as a businessman, 1 book just as a self-help book as a give back to society. And on the business books, well, for these, you better decide, okay, what's the business end game? For these business books, they actually they create an opportunity for me that allowed me to teach real estate investing around the country, Daniel. So understanding that before you start the book is very, very helpful. This other book, honestly, I didn't really I can't say I really pictured, I didn't even know if I would finish it. I just said, this is going to be my own therapy tool. And I started writing my book as a therapy tool. And eventually I looked at what I was creating, like, this can really help people. And then I got serious and I did more interviews of field experts. And the result is Take the High Road, Divorce with Compassion for Yourself and Your Family.
Well done, Mr. Andy. So, lastly, where can our listeners find more about you and your work?
Sure. Well, you can get the book, Take the High Road, Divorce with Compassion for Yourself and Your Family, on Amazon. It's available, as far as I know, on Amazon in most Western countries. And there's also a website on the back of the book, www.takethehighroaddivorce.com, and they can get in touch with me there.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Andy Heller, because if you support him, more books to come. Is there a follow-up for this book, Mr. Andy?
Well, there may be a 3rd edition. I wrote the first edition, debuted in 2022, and I recognized a couple of things, like big things I felt I needed to that I would change if I had to do over again. I spoke with my publisher, and we agreed that I would actually then self-publish, and I made some changes to the book. I added 2 chapters that I think really make the book a lot more impactful. So look, over the coming months and years, Daniel, with podcasts like yours and other experiences, if I can make this book better, I'll come out with a third edition. But so far right now, I'm still I'm riding the wave of just releasing a 2nd edition and enjoying podcasts like this and the feedback that my book has been generating from people that it's been helping has been humbling.
Well done, Mr. Andy, and you are most welcome to come back and promote the books that coming. And FeedSpot, thank you for being the number 2 best book podcast on the planet and being number 1 on the art book category. Thank you so much. And Lisa Notes, thank you for my latest score of 26 and belong to Popular Show, 10% Popular Show globally. Thank you so much. Once again, Mr. Andy, invite our listeners to buy all your books.
My pleasure, Daniel. Thank you for having me as a guest. And I guess I'll leave you with one final thought, everybody. If you're going through divorce, if you're thinking about it yourself, you've been divorced, you're having trouble co-parenting, or you've got somebody in your world who is in that position, My book can help. And I'll tell you all that it typically does get better, but you've got to take some steps, such as a book like mine, and maybe even getting a therapist that can help move that process along. But it typically does get better. And hopefully that's a word of encouragement. I can leave you all with a positive message here.
More to come, people. See you soon.